The Funhouse corpse. Most carnival visitors thought it was just another cheap scare. A crooked figure hung in the corner of a dusty funhouse, lit by flickering bulbs that made everything look half dead anyway. Its stiff limbs, cracking painted skin, and hollow mouth blended perfectly with the other old props. Kids dared each other to poke it. Teenagers slapped it for laughs. Adults stood beside it and took blurry photos they'd forget by morning. Workers moved it every Halloween, repainting the face, tightening the ropes, trying to make it look more creepy. They never realized they were touching something real. For more than 50 years, thousands of people walked right past it, and nobody stopped long enough to ask the obvious questions. Why did the shape look so disturbingly human? Why did the jaw hang a little too naturally? Why didn't the fingers bend like plastic? No one questioned it. And that silence became the most terrifying part, because the truth was simple. The prop was not a decoration. It was a real body. A dried, mummified human corpse, covered in decades of paint and dust. The secret stayed hidden until the 1970s, when a Hollywood television crew entered the funhouse to film a scene. One crew member grabbed the figure's arm to move it, just a normal adjustment. He pulled. The arm snapped off. At first, there was laughter. Old props break. It happens. Then someone looked closer. Inside the severed arm, there were no wires, no stuffing, no foam, only bone. Human bone. The room went silent. The air felt heavy. Everyone understood at the same moment. They were not standing next to a prop. They were standing next to a corpse. A dead man had been hanging there for decades. Thousands of visitors had photographed it, touched it, walked directly underneath it, and never knew they were inches away from a human body. The discovery unraveled one of the strangest true stories in American history. Because the body didn't get there on purpose. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a staged attraction. It was the result of small mistakes, coincidences, and bad luck that slowly transformed a forgotten outlaw into a traveling carnival exhibit no one ever recognized. The failed outlaw. Nobody claimed Elmer McCurdy was not a famous outlaw. He wasn't feared. He wasn't skilled. Honestly, he wasn't even very good at crime. In 1911, he heard about a train rumored to be carrying a huge payroll shipment. Easy money. So he planned a robbery. There was one problem. McCurdy was drunk, and he didn't understand the explosives he brought with him. He placed the charge, lit the fuse, and blew open the wrong section of the train. Inside, no stacks of cash, no treasure, just a few coins, and several bottles of whiskey. That was the entire haul. By sunrise, officers tracked him to a nearby barn. He was hiding inside, surrounded, and still intoxicated. A short shootout followed. Minutes later, Elmer McCurdy was dead. That should have been the end of his story. It wasn't. His body was taken to a funeral home in Oklahoma. The director prepared him and waited for relatives to claim the remains. No one came. Days passed, then weeks. No letters, no visitors, nothing. Eventually, the funeral director realized something. He was stuck with a body and a bill no one was going to pay. So he made a decision that would affect the next 60 years. He preserved the corpse. He used an arsenic-based embalming solution designed for long-term preservation. The chemicals hardened the skin, tightened the face, and gave McCurdy a strange, lifelike appearance. Instead of burying him, the director dressed him in clothes, stood him upright, and opened the doors to the public. He called the exhibit, "The Bandit Who Wouldn't Give Up." People paid a nickel to see him. They lined up. Some laughed, some stared. Many dropped coins directly into McCurdy's open mouth, thinking it was part of the attraction. Children tugged at his sleeves. Travelers posed for photographs beside him. Slowly, the failed outlaw became something else. Not a person, a curiosity. Years later, two men arrived. They claimed they were McCurdy's long-lost brothers. They brought paperwork. They demanded the body. The funeral director believed them. He handed McCurdy over. But the documents were fake. The men were carnival operators. They loaded the body into a truck, not carefully, not respectfully, but like freight, and they drove away. That was the moment Elmer McCurdy stopped being a man with a name and became an object, passed from owner to owner, while nobody questioned what he really was. The corpse that became a traveling attraction. Once McCurdy entered the carnival circuit, reality started to blur with performance. His body was repainted again and again, sometimes bright red, to look freshly dead, sometimes pale white, to resemble a ghost. Workers treated him like a prop. They nailed jackets directly into his hardened chest so the clothing wouldn't fall off. They hung him from ceilings. They posed him beside wax cowboys and staged gunfights. At one point, he was renamed the Dead Dope Fiend. They dressed him in rags and wired a cigarette into his mouth. The body slowly deteriorated. Small cracks appeared along the skin. Tiny flakes of preserved tissue broke away. His nose began to collapse inward. But the workers didn't see a person. They saw damage to a mannequin. Just wear and tear, nothing more. And the crowds never suspected anything. Why would they? Carnivals were filled with strange displays, creepy figures, and exaggerated attractions. One more unsettling shape didn't stand out. Years passed, then decades. By the 1960s, McCurdy had faded so badly, he barely looked human. No one asked who he was. No one wondered where he came from. He was sold, traded, and handed off from owner to owner. Eventually, he arrived at the Long Beach Pike amusement zone. There, he was placed inside a haunted funhouse. A rope was tied around him, and he was left hanging as part of the scenery. He blended perfectly with the peeling paint, the dusty shadows, and the flickering lights. Visitors walked directly beneath him, laughing, pointing, taking pictures, completely unaware they were inches away from a real human corpse, one that had traveled across the country for over 50 years. Elmer McCurdy lived a short and chaotic life, but after his death, his body became something far stranger, a wandering attraction, a legend no one realized they were helping continue. The Hollywood discovery that exposed everything. In 1976, a television crew entered the Funhouse. They only needed a quick background shot. Nothing serious. The building was dark. The lights flickered. The air smelled like salt water, oil, and old machinery. Most of the props looked ancient, so when a crew member grabbed the hanging figure and pulled on it, no one paid attention. Then the arm snapped off. At first, people laughed. Cheap prop, old attraction, normal. Then someone looked closer. Inside the break was not wood, not plastic, not wire. It was dry bone. Human bone. The laughter stopped instantly. People stepped backward. Someone yelled to call the police. Within hours, investigators flooded the building. The funhouse was sealed off like a crime scene. Medical examiners inspected the body. The conclusion came quickly. The mannequin was real, a mummified human corpse, preserved and displayed for decades. The tissues contained arsenic. That mattered. Arsenic embalming had not been used for many years, which meant the body had to come from the early 1900s. Investigators began digging through old death records, carnival routes, and forgotten paperwork across several states. Slowly, the story came together. The corpse had a name, Elmer McCurdy, a failed outlaw turned accidental sideshow attraction. In 1977, he was finally buried in Oklahoma, this time permanently. Workers poured concrete over the coffin. They wanted to make sure no carnival, collector, or curiosity seeker would ever dig him up again. After 66 years of traveling, hanging, and being displayed, Elmer McCurdy finally stayed in one place. But the discovery left behind a chilling thought. A real human body had been hanging in public view for over half a century, and no one noticed. Which raised a question. If one urban legend turned out to be true, how many others were hiding something real? The next story would answer that, and it would be far more violent. The Bunny Man, a legend with teeth. Most urban legends fall apart when you look for evidence. The Bunny Man does the opposite. This is not just a campfire story about a person in a costume. There are police reports, witness statements, and real fear connected to a lonely railroad bridge in Fairfax County, Virginia. The popular legend says an escaped asylum patient lived in the woods and hung mutilated rabbits from the trees. That part is folklore. But the real events happened in 1970, and they were violent. On October 19th, Air Force Cadet Bob Bennett and his fiancée were parked near the bridge late at night. It was quiet, dark. Then something moved near the road. A tall figure stepped into their headlights. He wore a white suit, rough-looking, dirty. Two long shapes hung from the head, like ears. Before they could react, the man began shouting. He accused them of trespassing. His voice was angry, sharp, unstable. Then he raised his arm. An axe flew toward the car. It crashed straight through the window. Glass exploded inward. The couple panicked and sped away. They did not stop driving until they were miles from the bridge. Bennett told police the man wore a full rabbit costume. His fiancée disagreed. She said it looked more like a hood with long pointed flaps. Police took statements. They recorded the damage, and they logged the axe attack as real. 10 days later, it happened again. A security guard named Paul Phillips was checking an unfinished house nearby. He noticed movement on the porch. A man stood there, chopping at the wooden posts with an axe. He wore the same white outfit. Phillips approached cautiously. The figure turned slowly. He lifted the axe. Then he threatened to chop off the guard's head. Phillips backed away immediately. The man stepped off the porch and disappeared into the woods. After the reports became public, sightings increased. Dozens of people claimed they saw the same figure near the railroad overpass, always at night, always carrying something sharp. Police searched the area. They followed leads. They interviewed witnesses. They never found him. No arrest, no confirmed identity. The Bunny Man became a legend, not because it was imaginary, but because someone real attacked people and vanished without leaving a single clear trace behind. The Green Man, a legend shaped by fear. In Beaver County, Pennsylvania, drivers whispered about something they saw on the back roads. A glowing figure, walking alone, long after midnight. Teenagers dared each other to cruise through the darkness with their headlights off. They hoped to catch a glimpse of the Green Man, a creature with a melted face, a figure who appeared without warning. Some claimed he chased their cars. Others said he reached toward their windows. But the truth was not supernatural. It was tragic. The so-called monster had a name, Raymond Robinson. When he was 8 years old, he climbed a bridge. Above him ran a power line carrying 22,000 volts. He grabbed it. The shock tore through his body. It destroyed much of his face. He survived, but he lost his eyes, his nose, and much of his jaw structure. Newspapers reported the accident at the time. Then the story faded. Raymond did not. As an adult, he spent most of his life indoors. He made belts, wallets, small leather goods. He avoided going out during the day, not because he was ashamed, but because strangers reacted with fear. He loved walking, so he walked at night, when the roads were empty, when the shadows felt safer than people. The problem was headlights. When a car passed, the bright beams reflected off his scarred skin. In the dark, it created a faint greenish glow. Drivers panicked. Rumors spread. And because most encounters lasted only seconds, imagination filled in the rest. Teens began searching for him like it was a ghost hunt. They drove out of their way hoping to spot him. But those who stopped and actually spoke to him told a different story. They described him as polite, soft-spoken, curious about others. He would talk with strangers, sometimes accept a cigarette, sometimes a drink. He never harmed anyone. The Green Man legend grew because people feared what they did not understand. Meanwhile, the real man behind the myth spent decades walking alone, unaware that his quiet life had turned into one of the most enduring urban legends in the region. The dead body under the mattress. This sounds like an internet story. A couple checks into a motel. They notice a horrible smell. Later, they discover a body hidden under the bed. It feels made up, except it actually happened more than once. The most infamous case occurred in 1999 at the Ocean View Motel in Atlantic City. Guests checked into room 112. Within minutes, they complained. The air smelled sour, rotten, heavy. Staff dismissed it. They blamed spilled drinks, old carpet, cleaning chemicals. The room was rented again and again. Every guest noticed the smell. Every guest reported it. Every guest was told the same thing. The room was fine. No one lifted the mattress. For days, people slept there, directly on the bed, breathing the air, complaining about the odor. Still, no one checked underneath. Eventually, housekeeping scheduled a deep cleaning. A worker noticed something. The smell was strongest near the bed frame. He lifted the mattress. Then he stopped moving. Inside the box, spring, wrapped in plastic, was a human body. The victim was a man named Saul Hernandez. He had been there for days, possibly longer. Long enough for the smell to fill the room. Long enough for multiple guests to sleep only inches above him, night after night, unaware. After the discovery, hotels quietly changed procedures. Some removed hollow box springs. Others required full inspections whenever guests reported a persistent odor. The story spread quickly, because the truth was worse than the legend. People had slept peacefully, directly above a corpse, without ever knowing why the room smelled wrong. People in the walls. the Massachusetts stalker who lived inside a family's home. The idea of someone secretly living inside your house feels like pure nightmare fuel. Something you would expect in a horror movie, not something that appears on the evening news. But the story that fueled this urban legend did not come from Hollywood. It came from a quiet neighborhood in Massachusetts. A normal family, a normal house, and small disturbances that did not make sense. Food missing from the refrigerator, objects slightly moved, scratching sounds behind the walls late at night. At first, they blamed each other. Then they blamed the kids. But as the strange activity continued, one thing became clear. Someone else was inside the house with them. That someone was Daniel LaPlante, a teenager already known to police for break-ins and harassment. What the family did not know was that LaPlante had found a small crawl space behind their basement wall. He slipped inside, and once he was there, he realized he could move between different wall cavities like a hidden tunnel system. He could hear them, he could watch them, he could study their routines. And worst of all, he knew exactly when they would be gone. When the family left for work or school, he would crawl out of the walls, he would eat their food, try on their clothes, move their personal belongings, then slip back into the darkness before anyone returned home. The family began to feel watched. Rooms they knew were clean looked disturbed. Cabinets they were sure they had closed stood slightly open, but nothing valuable was missing. There were no signs of forced entry. Days of confusion turned into weeks. Weeks turned into fear. They contacted police, but without clear evidence of a break-in, there was little officers could do. Everything changed one night. The children came home alone. They heard movement upstairs, not the normal creaking of a house settling, something heavier, intentional. They followed the sound to a bedroom. On the wall, they saw messages, scrawled in what appeared to be blood. Panicked, they ran to a neighbor's house and called authorities. When police searched the home, they found it. A small panel hidden behind a dresser, almost invisible. Inside the crawl space, curled in the tight darkness, was Daniel LaPlante. He had been living inside their walls for weeks, possibly months. Investigators discovered he had drilled tiny peepholes through the drywall. He used them to watch the family, as they slept, as they ate dinner, as they lived their daily lives, unaware he was only inches away. Officers found blankets, food wrappers, a makeshift cup, personal items taken from different rooms in the house. The case shocked the entire community. It erased the line between nightmare and reality. The idea of someone living in your walls was not exaggerated folklore. It had already happened, and as terrifying as this case was, it was not the only one. The next real story from Japan would push this legend even further, because unlike LaPlante, that intruder stayed hidden for an entire year. The Japanese woman who lived in a closet for a year. If the Massachusetts case proved someone could hide inside your walls, this case proved someone could live inside your home for a long time, without you knowing. In Fukuoka, Japan, a man noticed something strange. Food kept disappearing. Not a lot, just small amounts, a snack missing, leftovers reduced. At first, he ignored it. He assumed he forgot what he had eaten, but then more things happened. The bathroom felt humid, even when he hadn't showered. A blanket looked slightly moved. A cabinet door stood open, even though he was sure he had closed it. The apartment never looked disturbed, but it never felt empty either. Eventually, he worried he was losing his memory, or someone was entering his home, so he installed a hidden camera in the kitchen. What it recorded shocked police. Late at night, after the man went to sleep, the small sliding door of an overhead closet slowly opened. A woman crawled out, quietly, carefully. She stretched her arms, walked to the refrigerator, opened it, and began eating. Calmly, like she had done it many times before. She used the bathroom, walked around the apartment, then returned to the closet. She climbed back inside and gently closed the door, as if she had never been there. Police searched the apartment. When they opened the closet, they found her, curled inside a cramped space. She had a blanket, a bottle of water, and small personal items she had collected. She had been living there for almost a year. She left only when the man went to work, then returned before he came home, hidden just feet away every single day. This was not a ghost story, not anything supernatural. It was a reminder. Sometimes the scariest presence in your home is someone you never realized was already inside it. Loyon, the masked walker of Switzerland. In the forests near Malls, Switzerland, hikers began noticing the same figure, always alone, always silent. He was tall. He wore a long camouflage coat that almost touched the ground, and his face was completely hidden behind a military-style gas mask. No skin visible, no eyes visible, nothing. People gave him a name, Le Loyon, Some called him the ghost of malls. Others stopped hiking the trail by themselves. Sightings continued for years, nearly a decade. He never spoke. He never approached anyone. He never asked for help. He simply walked the same trail at the same slow pace every time, like he was following a routine only he understood. Then a photographer captured a clear image. The picture was published in a local newspaper. Within days, it spread across Europe. Curiosity replaced caution. Visitors arrived hoping to find him. Some wanted to film him. Some wanted to confront him. Some just wanted proof he was real. After that, the sighting stopped. Weeks later, hikers discovered something beside the path. A small pile of clothing, carefully folded, the coat, the boots, and the gas mask. Inside the mask, there was a handwritten note. It said the attention had frightened him. The walks once brought him peace. Now they brought anxiety. Police confirmed the clothing belonged to the masked walker, but the person behind the mask was never publicly identified. After that day, Loyon disappeared. No confirmed sightings, no explanation. Some believe he quietly moved away. Others think he continued watching from a distance, choosing anonymity over attention, and the trail returned to silence. The Toxic Lady, a collapse no one could explain. On February 19, 1994, the emergency room at Riverside General Hospital in California was busy. Paramedics rushed in with a 31-year-old woman named Gloria Ramirez. She was struggling to breathe. She was in severe distress from late-stage cervical cancer. Nurses surrounded the bed. They prepared oxygen, started IV lines, monitors beeped. Everything seemed routine until it didn't. As staff leaned closer, something felt wrong. Her skin looked unusually slick, almost greasy. There was a faint chemical smell in the air. When a nurse drew a blood sample, a strange odor drifted upward, sharp, ammonia-like. The nurse paused. Her eyes widened. Then she swayed and collapsed to the floor. Another nurse rushed forward to help. She collapsed too. A respiratory therapist stepped in. He felt sudden numbness in his legs. He slid down the wall, unable to stand. Within minutes, more staff reported symptoms: dizziness, burning in the throat, nausea. Some struggled to breathe. The emergency room descended into chaos. 23 hospital workers showed signs of exposure to something unknown. 5 required hospitalization. The entire ER was evacuated. Hazmat teams entered the building in protective suits. They searched for gas leaks, chemical spills, anything. They found nothing. Gloria Ramirez died that night, and the case exploded into national headlines. People demanded answers. How could one patient cause multiple medical professionals to collapse? Some experts suggested her body had produced a toxic gas during treatment. Others believed the hospital was hiding an environmental contamination issue. Theories multiplied, investigations followed, but no explanation satisfied everyone. Decades later, the incident remains one of the most debated medical mysteries in modern history. No single answer has ever fully explained what happened in that room. Theories, aftermath, and why the legend survives. Investigators eventually focused on one unusual explanation. Inside Gloria Ramirez's home, they found a compound called DMSO. It was sometimes used as a powerful pain treatment. Under certain extreme conditions, DMSO can change chemically. It can become DMSO2 and possibly DMSO4, a dangerous gas capable of causing many of the symptoms reported in the emergency room. The theory explained several details: the ammonia-like smell, the strange appearance of the blood, and the sudden collapse of medical staff. But it also created new questions. Why didn't everyone in the room become sick? Why were only certain people affected? And why has the reaction never been reproduced since? Some experts rejected the theory completely. Others suggested mass psychogenic illness, a panic reaction spreading between staff. But that explanation struggled to account for the workers who required extended medical treatment. In the end, no single answer satisfied everyone. That uncertainty transformed Gloria Ramirez into something else. A figure suspended between science and legend. And when you step back and look at all of these stories together, the Funhouse corpse people touched without knowing, the real axe-wielding bunny man no officer ever caught, the misunderstood green man mistaken for a monster, the bodies hidden beneath motel beds, the intruders living inside walls and closets, the masked walker in the forests of Switzerland, and the hospital collapse doctors still debate, one truth becomes clear. Urban legends do not survive because people exaggerate. They survive because something real was there first. Something unsettling, something unexplained, something that reminds us how thin the line really is between a scary story and a headline.